Good morning, everybody. I also know that from the, well, we're going to start with music. So let's start with music.
All right. I knew this might happen. I'm going to try with my other computer. Jacob, are you able to share the screen with your, or I can send it right now to Bruce. Okay.
Okay. And I can talk for a moment while you're doing that. And maybe even start singing before it comes up.
Sure.
I chose a phrase from Psalm 93, Mikolot Maim Rabim Adirim Mishbareyam. I was really taken by the word adir, 8, and I was trying to decide like what I wanted my translation of that word to be, because I saw folks translating it as majestic in some places, vast in other places, and as even as mighty. And so, well, what's vast, mighty, and majestic? And so when I looked at Psalm 93 and saw it in connection with the ocean and with the sea, like that the adir is connecting God to this idea of vastness and majesty and might, like we think of when we think of the sea. And it's also used in Shirat Hayam, in the Song of the Sea, that God is Edar Bakodesh. So I thought, why not explore? Also, the word only appears, adir only appears 7 times in the Psalms, twice in Psalm 8 and twice in Psalm 93. So this is
Jacob, I would add, people know the word adir from a very famous Pesach song, right?
Oh yeah, adir hu.
Adir hu. That's the same word. So that's you might
go.
know that from singing that at the Seder.
Absolutely. So this is a Nava Tehillah tune for Mikolot Mayim Rabim by Daphna Rosenberg. And we'll get the text up in a moment, but you can all just kind of listen.
Bruce, I sent you the text, and I'm getting on my other computer.
Mikolo Mayim Rabim Adirim Mishbereyam Mikolo Mayim Rabim Adirim Mishbereyam Adir Bamarom Adonai Adir Bamarom Adonai Adir Bamarom Adonai Adir Bamarom Adonai Mikolo Mayim Rabim Adirim Mishbereyam Mikolo Mayim Rabim Adirim Mishbereyam Adir Bamarom Adonai Adir Bamarom Adonai Adir Bamarom Adonai Adir Bamarom Adonai Mikolo Mayim Rabim Adirim Mishbereyam Mikolo Mayim Rabim Adirim Mishbereyam Adir Bamarom Adonai Adir Bamarom Adonai Adir Bamarom Adonai Adir Bamarom Adonai.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for that, Jacob. Beautiful. So Daphna Rosenberg came to CBST a couple of years ago. Some of you might remember that the two musical leaders of Nava Tehillah did a workshop at CBST, and we've been talking to them about coming to lead a Friday night service when they're next in the United States, but then the COVID-19 happened. So, but we would love to have them. Nava Tehillah is a wonderful, wonderful musical, very music-focused Kehillah community in Jerusalem. And we sing a lot of the settings that they've written and they meet in the basement of Kol HaNeshama, the synagogue building where Kol HaNeshama. So we use music from Kol HaNeshama. We use music for Navatila. So welcome everybody. And just a brief announcement as we start the study for this morning that Mia Rothstein will be with us at 10:45 to answer questions about the Hebrew classes that are beginning on Monday. So if you're interested in any of those classes, stay after we finish on at 10:45 and we'll discuss the classes. All right, so we are today going to finish up our study of Psalm 8. Harold has a new computer. So Mazel Tov, Harold. I will join you sometime not so far in the future, I hope. And hope the computer brings you much joy and connection.
Thank you.
So can we look at the Bernstein Psalm 8?
Give me a second. I'm hoping I'm
Sure, thank you.
between old and new for a minute here.
Great. Jacob, would you repeat what you said about our deer now that we're starting class? Because that word is so important in this psalm.
Sure.
Now that everybody's here.
So first I found that it appears in the Psalms 7 times, twice in Psalm 8 and twice in Psalm 93, and then it's also in 1676 and 136. I don't know why they all end with 6, but that whatever. I've been seeing different translations for it, in both in different translations of the Psalms, but also between those different occurrences. And Brown Driver Briggs dictionary indicates it as majestic, but also when it talks about the root, notes that there's something about nobility and majesty and vastness. So I've seen the word vast used, and I've seen the word mighty used. And so for me, when I made the connection to Psalm 93 and also Shirat Hayam, this idea of like Adir, for me, I think I've landed on it being that same kind of majesty and might and vastness that I think of when I think of the sea.
Beautiful.
Analogy.
So that word is found, as we've discussed, both in Pasuk, the second verse, and then in that final verse, which is, we saw how Alter read that it's separate from the quote, which is the bulk of the center part of the psalm, and it's really the opening and kind of the coda. And it's found in, as I mentioned, in our Rosh Hashanah Musaf liturgy in the Kedusha. So that's amazing to use. So that means it's considered by a very important phrase, that's Ma Adir Shimcha B'chol Haaretz. So how Adir, how mighty, how majestic, how deep. All right, so this is, we're going to look at Psalm 8. This is Gaia Bernstein's translation. And let's look at how she does it. I'm going to read it through and then we'll notice things and be prepared. I'm not going to talk about it first. I'm going to ask people to respond to it, but let me read it through. And if you have any of the other translations or Hebrew in front of you, all the better. Awesome Lord of all, I see you in clods of fertile earth beneath my feet, in clouds and moon and stars and sky above my head, in suckling babies who can't talk but will grow to know you. Tend your sheep and see your mark everywhere. Why should you care about us? Who are we to be crowned keepers of your earth, your works, your sheep and cattle, your birds and fish and ocean? O great God of all things, you care. We should. Okay, so let's open it up to responses to that. Notice a few things. First of all, as we've pointed out, she's not interested in keeping to the structure of the psalm as Alter is and Levi is. She doesn't care about how many verses there are. She doesn't use the superscription, notice that. So let's look a little bit at what she does, what she does with what the original was and how we respond to this particular one. Any reactions?
I'm waiting for either hands or chat, but I will repeat what the rabbi said yesterday, that we are interested in some of the quieter voices of the class. We have 90 people some days, and we've had wonderful participation from several dozen, and there's several we have not yet heard from. So we will be giving a little priority to them. Harriet Beckman, why don't you lead us off?
Actually, it's Ruth Plave.
Okay, sorry.
Harold, can you move the screen a little bit? I see 9, but I don't see 8 so well. Yeah, perfect. Thank
Okay,
you.
great.
So I had a question. I see here that this author talks about man or humankind as being keepers of the earth. The other translations, and maybe the actual Hebrew itself, is talking about the creation story, one of the two creation stories that views Adam as being the dominator, and I found that offensive personally.
So I think what you're pointing to is, Ruth, is a really brilliant and sensitive insight. The Hebrew, and again, remember what the Hebrew means is always going to be a little elusive. Nobody has the total answer to that because it's translation of a language that's very ancient. So the Hebrew word is tamshilehu, which is from the root word that involves some kind of ruling over. Some people use dominion, but many contemporary people say, rather than translate it, it doesn't mean that it means that we need to be, if you rule over something, it's not only a negative feeling, it's you are entrusted, their care is entrusted to you. So many people react the way that you're seeing Dr. Bernstein, this translator, that the ruling over doesn't mean to be cruel and evil. It means you have responsibility. You're a steward. And they go for the concept of stewardship rather than power over. But of course, what does power over mean? It means you're responsible. How you use that power determines whether it's bad or good. But it's like a parent, you could say, has power over their children. If they do it right, they're not destroying their kids in the process. As long as their children are vulnerable and weak, they are caring for them, they're protecting them. And that's how this translator, and many people, by the way, read that Bible story as saying, therefore we're stewards, we have responsibility because we have power to destroy it. We have responsibility to be good stewards of it. And honestly, the Jewish ecology movement looks to this concept as really one of its sources. Power is good or bad in how it's used, doesn't have an intrinsic value, but when it's used badly, power is bad. When power is used well, power is good. It's not that power itself is bad. So she's interpreting this by saying, we have been keepers, like stewards of your earth. In other words, it's our job to take things, and so that's how she's translating it.
Yeah, Rabbi, I guess.
But there are those who translate it otherwise. You're right. There are those who say, who cares about the animals or the earth because we're in charge.
Rabbi, just one other point.
Sure.
I think that, even though the poetry that's come from Psalm 8 is so beautiful with it, Shakespeare and so forth, there is an element of hubris that I find, the idea that God was so wonderful to have made man in his image, this majestic thing, and I think there's.
You mean because you think human beings are so horrible right about now?
Yeah, that's right.
That maybe God just made a big mistake is the issue, and we should be writing Psalms about, oh God, you goofed. Yeah, hard to argue with that. And I think that reflects, the lens through which we're looking at the world at any given time, right? And I think this psalmist is being aware of the beauty in the world, including in humanity, and is not focused. And by the way, there are other places where we're very aware, and we've seen the Rishaim, the evildoers. We have Ra, Rish, and the Psalms 1 through 7. We've seen a lot of references to bad people, bad and negative things. But you're right, this psalm is celebrating humanity and the world that God created. And you might not be in the mood to feel that right now. Totally get that. But you're right. The psalm is not focusing on the ways that human beings have disappointed the Creator. And I think we've seen that in other psalms.
Rafaela, you put something interesting in the chat. Would you like to share that with us and explain? If you'd like to unmute yourself, Rafaela. All right, we're going to hold on Rafaela then and go to Stephen. Stephen's iPad.
No, I'm unmuted.
Oh, okay, Rafaela, you got that. You wrote something in the chat that you might want to expand upon.
Well, this is my favorite translation so far. I agree totally with Ruth. I don't like the idea of people being having dominion over the animals. I like that people should have responsibility as keepers of animals and the world. And I also agree with something Noreen was saying, that the world is pretty endangered right now, and we haven't done such a great job. So
I agree with you, Raphael. So the question is, the world is in danger because human beings abuse their power.
yes,
So maybe this psalm is not disagreeing with you, but saying we need to recognize that our power is huge, and if we are not careful, it's dangerous.
yes,
But it's not that we don't have the power to damage the earth. We know we do have that power because look what we're doing.
yes.
So I don't think the psalm is disagreeing with you that we don't have that power. I think the psalm is saying, be careful. Use the power for good. Understand that power you have the power to destroy the earth. You have the power to make extinct the animals. You have the power to destroy the rainforest. You have the power but you are responsible. You are keepers. You are the stewards. Make sure you use that power to protect, not to destroy. So that's what I think. I don't disagree with you that human beings have done a lousy job at protecting the earth. But I think the psalmist is saying, you have that, is not to pretend we don't have the power, because we have the power to destroy. Therefore, we have the power to protect. And the psalmist is saying, use that awesome power that God has given humanity to protect, to recognize that we are keepers, not destroyers.
Yes.
So maybe we would imagine it now, and this is to Ruth also, it's a little aspirational now, right? It's a reminder of what we should be doing, but we can't deny that we have the power to actually destroy, because that's what we see happening ecologically.
Yes.
Have people seen those amazing pictures from the satellites to show how little pollution there is now during the shutdown, and how the skies are so much less polluted? It's interesting.
Stephen.
Yes. Hi, everybody. Good morning.
Hi, Stephen.
I wanted to just say to Rafaela that if you and I got married, your name could be Rafaela Raphael.
And you have a question?
Yes. What I love about this one is that the connection to nature, because I'm out of the city this week, and I've been writing my psalm for the past few days, but I went to the Bay Beach out here, and it was very crowded, and there was a lot of people, and I was feeling a little anxious. And then I turned around and looked out onto the horizon of just the water, and I saw God in that moment. So just the fact that she's constantly talking about the birds and the fish and the sky and the stars, I felt that yesterday in a way that I don't feel that in New York City.
Beautiful, Stephen. And that goes back to what Jacob said about Adir, the majesty or the greatness or the bigness of the word Adir can be connected to something like the ocean, that kind of greatness, that kind of majesty. So for sure, beautiful. Thank you.
Simon or Sherry?
So I think that the difference between Mitchell and Bernstein really illuminates this distinction between domination and stewardship. You look at the Mitchell, you have placed the whole world in our hands. How terrible is the power on all the earth? And in the Bernstein, it's who are we to be crowned keepers of the world? we should be, ends up with we should care.
Yeah.
So this whole discussion we've been having is just epitomized as two very different readings of the same psalm.
Excellent. And I do love the ending of hers that acknowledges that God cares and we should too, not that God doesn't care. And therefore she's making very clear that the reason things are terrible right now, ecologically speaking, I would argue, is because we have failed, not because God has failed. Yeah.
Saul.
Good morning.
Good morning.
So you remember line 3, the one about out of the mouths of babes, caused people problems because where does this come from? And Alta talks about how sometimes things like this could be because of scribal mistransmission, but I love the way she weaves it into
Yes.
everything before that. Suckling babes are the creations of God, and they will grow up and see God everywhere.
Exactly. And this is exactly what I argue we should be doing with Psalms. I love studying them, trying to understand the original Hebrew. And then the job is, how do we make it meaningful? And she ignores that issue about whether it's past tense or future tense. And she says, okay, what do I think the Psalm is saying to me that will make it meaningful? I love that. Yes.
Yeah.
So let's take one more, and then I think we should go to Fisher so we can make sure to.
Well, I'll say that Leslie Bernstein made the same point. Seems not that babes have such wisdom, but they have the potential to become wise. And Robin Baslaw is our last question for this round.
So when we read this, I was thinking of Eliyahu Hanavi, and I think there's some line there that we feel Eliyahu Hanavi's presence when a baby is born. And to me, part of what this psalm is talking about is that our healing comes from nurturing.
Beautiful.
Comes from nurturing the earth and from babies, and we are at our best when we heal. And that's
beautiful, Robin. That's just beautiful.
And I will just say that Randy Sarakoff says the last line here, "Oh great God of all things, you care." We should be a poster for our next peaceful protest.
That's great.
Yeah.
Perfect. Yes.
Harold, can I make a comment? It's Gail. I raised my hand before.
Gail, you know what? We're trying to move to the next one.
Yeah, look, because I really want to cover Fisher, but maybe you'll be able to fold your comment into responding to Fisher.
Sure.
So Fisher, or Fisher Summit.
Okay, so I'm going to read this out loud, and then we'll take comments. And remember, Fisher comes with a Zen Buddhist background and perspective. Your unsayable name, it covers all the earth, and your presence extends ever outward from the furthest conceivable point. Out of the mouths of babes who speak only wordless, wondering words, you fashion your incomprehensible power that gathers into silence all opposition, all that pressure to deaden and destroy. When I behold the night sky, the work of your fingers, the bright moon, and the many layered stars which you have established, I think, a woman is so frail, and you remember her. A man so small, and you think of him. And yet in you, woman and man become as angels, crowned with a luminous presence, and you have given them care for the works of your hands, placed the solid growing earth under their feet. Flocks of birds and herds of deer, oxen and sheep, goats and cows, soaring birds and darting fishes, all that swims the paths of the sea. O you whom I am ever addressing, your unsayable name covers covers heaven and earth. Okay, so first let me just say so there's no superscription. We don't have the Lamanatseach al Hagitit. And again, it's less worried about the original structure, though closer than Bernstein to trying to follow that structure. All right, so now let's open it up to thoughts, responses, and you're welcome to respond also to Bernstein's translation as well. But I wanted to make sure we get both of these up.
Randy had her hand up next, and then Gail. Randy, I read your comment, but you have something else you would like to add also.
Well, it kind of speaks to the comment. It's Psalm 8 here speaks to today's times to me. Climate change. Man is responsible now for a lot of damage. And as the rabbi pointed out, since COVID, maybe some of that is being undone. But it's us, man and woman, that should take care of the animals, the earth, each other. Black Lives Matter. Honestly, this Psalm 8 is perfect for the times we're in today. And I think the last one, Bernstein, really spoke to that, but you can still see it in this one as well, in this interpretation.
Thank you. Beautiful.
Lots of beautiful things in the chat. Yael Bat-Chava says it reminds me of the poem on children by Khalil Gibran.
Yes,
How we're
indeed.
the keepers of our children, but not their owners. And then we have a wonderful comment, just as people are talking about their pets a lot here. Andrea Katz says, when discussing animals and our relationship to them, we are very human-centric. We assume we are the only ones with a relationship to God. And I think the next sentence would be, perhaps God and animals have their own relationship one to the other, not mediated by us.
Well, I think that's an important point. One clarifying point I would make is this: I don't think this is denying that animals might have a relationship with God. This is acknowledging that human beings have the power to destroy all animal life. Animals don't really have the power to destroy everything. And I think this is acknowledging that power and reminding us of that power so that it's used well. This is, I don't know of any animal that's going to develop an atomic bomb, or cause the kind of ecosystem disasters that humanity is capable of. So I think that's what this psalm is talking about, not talking about whether or not animals have a relationship with God, but whether human beings have the power given by God and have not necessarily used that power well, and not understood that power to be keepers rather than destroyers.
Gail Winter, if you...
Oh, thank you. Good morning. Can you hear me okay? I'm on my mic. Okay.
Yes.
So it's connected actually to the rabbi's last comment. On Bernstein, I love the last two lines too, in terms of if you care, we should, kind of that connection and lesson. But then also with power, I was going to relate it a lot to my work, which has to do with when you work with individuals at a micro level, you're often working around benevolent power versus abusive power.
That's a good distinction.
And that is really important because so often people come in and have had very abusive situations. They can identify with them, whatever it is. And unless that distinction's made and worked on, I mean, that affects many of us.
And I think that I think that's really an important point, and Yael bringing up the relationship with kids, and I think of Yael's spectacular translation of Psalm 7, recognizing you can use power with children, though your intention is good, unless you're really conscious of how you're using the power you have as a parent, you can just become another weapon that releases a weapon you've received from your parents onto your kids, and that's a great example of
Absolutely.
You're a keeper of these kids and how you have to develop this. So I want to also point out Fisher. We remember when we first discussed Fisher doesn't usually talk about or use language of God. Remember that? We talked a lot about how, but it's interesting that Fisher does have at the beginning of this psalm, your unsayable name. So I'd be interested in those who have Buddhist backgrounds in the group. What do you imagine Fisher to mean in that, your unsayable name, as the opening for this psalm? And how do you imagine Fisher understands, who is Fisher speaking to when Fisher opens it with your unsayable name, colon, and you notice it was all in lower caps. Your unsayable name is in lower caps. It covers all the earth. So I'd be interested if anybody has a thought about that.
Maybe Kenneth seems to be one of our Buddhist representatives. Is Kenneth here today, and does he want to say something? I don't see Hillary Nudell.
Small caps. Marcia corrected me. Small caps. I'm sorry. Whoops.
All right.
I have to correct myself. I'm looking through Fisher. He opens up every psalm with those caps. But that sentence has the opening with yes. So that's interesting. I take that back. I'm looking through the book. He opens up every psalm with those caps. Interesting. So if people have thoughts about that, I'd love to hear. Any other thoughts about these Psalms?
Hillary is here. If
Hillary
Hillary
is
wants
here.
to give us the Buddhist practicing perspective. Hillary?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Some problems with this.
We can hear you. We
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
We can hear you.
Oh, you can hear me.
Yes.
Oh. All right. Sorry.
Do we want to do somebody else before Hillary?
Shep has had his hand up for a while Hillary recombobulates here. Shep?
Oh yeah, about the Bernstein one. I was just thinking there's a concept in Judaism of God and humanity being co-creators. Is that right? Well, maybe we should see ourselves with the animals in a more cooperative way also. Like God is above us and maybe animals below, but we have to, as we co-create with God, we have got to co-create and cooperate with the animals instead of being.
I agree, except we have to acknowledge that's what the psalm is saying. We have to change our attitude. Yeah. The truth is we have the power though. And by pretending that humanity doesn't have that power doesn't help. And that's what Gail was saying. If you go into a situation and pretend you don't have power, but you do have power, chances are you're going to use that power badly. If you understand you have power and you consciously use it for good, but if you pretend the power isn't there, that's not helping anybody. If you say, oh, that's like white privilege. If I don't consciously acknowledge, not through no fault of my own, I didn't choose to have white privilege, but I have white privilege. That's power. I could use it well, or I could use it in a bad way. And that's what I think the psalm is saying. Human beings have power over the earth and over animals. If we don't acknowledge that and choose to use it well, we can't pretend we have the same level of power as the animals. It's not true. While animals do kill each other, they don't usually commit acts of genocide. They don't develop weapons that can destroy the entire earth. For sure, animals kill each other. There's nothing, I'm not saying everybody needs to be
they gotta eat. They gotta eat.
But that's where I disagree with you, Shep. To say, okay, let's just all be kumbaya and pretend we don't have this power. But I'm going back to Gail. We have to acknowledge power and say, do we use it? Yeah.
I'm not saying
all right, let's go back to Hillary now, Shep. Got it, Shep. Thank you.
Hillary?
Can you hear me now?
No, now we're not hearing you again. We heard you
so
before.
Now I can't hear myself, but you can hear me, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. So there are two ideas in Buddhism. One is that there is the experience of God without the belief in God. And the other idea is that the Buddhists don't say that you believe or you don't believe. They don't say either one. They say, we just don't discuss this issue, that it doesn't lead to the removal of suffering. So we just don't go there. So I think Norman Fisher has taken that liberty, not just in this psalm, but in other psalms as well, to directly address this divine power in the universe and to not ignore it. I think he's saying something with that assertion.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for that.
Jim Brule.
Okay, Brule. I got struck, especially with this translation, on a different angle on it, which is how overwhelmingly grateful or filled with gratitude and humility we should be that here's this creator of the universe who gives it all to us. I mean, I think that's just an astounding position to be in, one that propels me to the same place, right? So I've got to, in the light of that I should somehow be, as a human, given this gift, it changes my energetic basis for it, doesn't remove my responsibility, but it also sets up a different relationship. It's not just that I've been given this, now what am I going to do with it? But it's been given, and wow. So that's kind of my new look.
Beautiful. Thank you, Jim. Beautiful.
Sherry Allen.
Thanks. I wanted to just go back to a question that was posed, I think, yesterday. You know, why do we use, what's the use of the word name? You know, your name, as opposed to just not saying you are, you know, majestic and all your. And I noticed in Bernstein, she doesn't do that at all. She doesn't say your name. She says, awesome Lord of all, and she ends, oh great God of all things. So she doesn't, whereas, you know, Mitchell or whoever we were just talking about, you know, uses, you know, the unnameable name or whatever. There have been other ways of describing that, but it's always, you know, included the new name. So I guess I'm more wondering, you know, if we can go back to that original question, why, you know, why this emphasis on naming in some of these and consciously not saying that in others?
Yep. So I'll say briefly, but I want to hear from others too on the Psalm. Briefly, my feeling about it is that naming is a power that we're told in Genesis, by the way, that we're given as human beings. And the power to name is part of our power to co-create the universe. And, you know, I think of Zelda's poem, right? How we are named identifies who we are in the world. We're given one name by our parents. We're given one name by our deeds. We're given one name by our enemies. We're given one name by our friends, given one name by the work we do in the world, one name by our children, et cetera, et cetera. So I think part of it is that there's a very deep sense in Jewish thought about the power of naming something. And we can influence our names by how we are in the world. And I think this is a little bit of asking, by which name do we know God, so to speak? Do we know God by the name of mercy and compassionate? Do we know God by the name of the angry God? Do we know God? What is our relationship to this enormous power? And in naming, we actually end up naming characteristics, which is a deeply Reconstructionist idea, right? Actually, Maimonides talked about the same thing, that the best we can do is name characteristics of God. We can't, and that I think gets to a little bit of Norman Fisher. God's name is ultimately unknowable, unnameable, and even the Yud He Vav He is unsayable, because all we can get to is describe God's characteristics: compassionate, kind, patient, forgiving, angry, and we can choose which of God's names we surround ourselves with, so to speak, and therefore which characteristics we want to aspire to. But I think it's a beautiful way, and Bernstein really shows how it's possible to leave certain things behind because they're not meaningful to her. And that's okay in writing our own Psalms. Thank you for that, Sherry.
Catherine Keenan.
I'm here. I just unmuted. I like the Fisher because it keeps the wonder of Psalm 8. And I thought in Bernstein, it kind of lost God's majesty and it lost our godlike qualities. And it reminded me of Genesis and the end of Genesis chapter 1, where God goes through our dominion and what it means.
Yeah.
And then at the very end, it says, and God saw everything he had made, and behold, it was very good. So that includes us. So I think Psalm 8 and also the Fisher interpretation leads us to this consciousness, leads us to develop this quality that God gave us, which is good. It's awareness, it's stewardship, it's to take care of things. So I really like the Fisher interpretation of this.
Beautiful, Catherine. And I think, Catherine, you're pointing to another issue, which I think we're all becoming more and more aware of. Some of us are much more comfortable with a very vernacular adaptation or translation of the poem, and we don't want to hear that archaic language. And some of us are very pulled to the archaic language. Somebody said to me recently, was it somebody in this class that they had to confess they really only like the King James translation? Was that you, Harold? Yes, I knew somebody, because part of it, there's a majesty to it that a vernacular loses. But on the other hand, it's a little off-putting if you're not so comfortable with formal language. And sometimes we confuse formal language with distance or lack of passion. And I don't think that's true. I too respond. And, you know, when the Vatican went through its big changes in the early 60s, and said, we're going to replace Latin with vernacular language. We want it to be all understood. We want it to be very accessible. That was the word of the 60s, right? Everything had to be accessible. There is something that's lost and accessible. As much as we want everything to be accessible, if it loses a little bit of its loftiness, we also lose a little bit. On the other hand, something that's very vernacular, like Bernstein, shows us the power of our using our own language. We don't have to be King James, or we don't have to be biblical Hebrew to make this text meaningful. And part of what I want to show you in examining all these different translations is that things are going to hit you in different ways. And sometimes you're just going to love the very vernacular, the very folk sounding. And sometimes you're going to be very moved by a phrase that's going to be very majestic and formal and not as accessible. And so just watch yourself and kind of see how you responded. There's no good or bad. There's no value here. But that's a piece of what we're looking at, is the difference sometimes between a formal language that for some people feels majestic and powerful, and for other people formal sounds cold and distant. And there's no one, it's a matter of our kind of makeup, you know, and who we are. And I've said this when we do our German synagogue music Shabbat. For the German synagogue world of the 1800s, the music that they were writing, which sounded so closely reflecting and evocative of Western classical music, that was the genre of music they knew. But for a contemporary American synagogue, where the love of classical music is diminishing, and what the form of music most people know is American folk music, people want synagogue music to sound like Simon and Garfunkel or the Beatles, and because that's the familiar language, musical language we have. And sometimes people in synagogues feel like any music that sounds like 19th century German synagogue music sounds uptight and distant. And for other people, it's majestic and powerful. And it's really a matter of your language, your musical language. It's not a value. And for sure, the more that you feel comfortable with classical music and feel like it's your language, then when you hear that music in a synagogue setting, you're going to love it, right? So that's a little bit of what we're happening here, but all is good. There is no value, but it's a matter of being conscious a little bit about what's feeding a reaction to something. I think Bernstein, I'm so glad that she wrote this. She's not a scholar. She's a Jew. You know, she knows Hebrew because she's an Orthodox Jew, but she's a doctor. But these Psalms mean something to her personally. Her book is like what we would do if we published our stuff, which was so meaningful. We want other people to see it. So I'm so happy that people love her Psalms. Before we end for today, I want to ask Yael, if you're here. Yael mentioned yesterday in chat that she shared her Psalm with her kids. Yael, I'm putting you on the spot, so you could say no. It's totally okay. But would you be willing to tell us what that was like to share your Psalm with your kids? You could say no.
No, I'm happy
okay.
to share it.
I didn't check with her in advance.
It's okay. Once I shared it with them, I can share it
okay.
with you. I think they were moved. And they started apologizing for always being late. And I said, no, that's not what this is about. It's about me explaining to myself and now to you why I've been so triggered at the door, and my work to overcome that, and that it's really about forgiveness. It's, forgiving my mom for who she was, and forgiving my kids for who they are, and forgiving myself. And I think they got it. It was a good exchange.
Wow.
You've saved them years of therapy, Yael. I'm serious. By them hearing you basically apologize, but in a way that helps them understand you, what more could we ever want from a parent? That is so beautiful. And I'm so deeply, deeply moved that the Psalms kind of help that happen. And you had a form to do it that wasn't so scary, so that they could read something. That's so, so beautiful. Thank you. And thanks for sharing that.
Rabbi, if I could do a few quick
Yes.
housekeeping things before we close up. One is several people have said that several people have said they love the chat, and there's been a very active chat, and several people have said that they found the chat distracting. There are ways on each device to mute or to turn off chat so that you're not seeing it or you're just seeing the speaker. I'm not going to go over all of them, but if you're one of those people who finds the chat distracting, you can even go to just Google and say, how do I turn off chat in Zoom? And you can figure it out. Number two is, I am very happy to keep on scanning and sending out the passages from the translations, but I will say that there's no way we're going to get through all of our three major books, Alter's Book of Psalms, Stephen Mitchell's Book of Psalms, and Norman Fisher. I think at this point, you want to live with them the rest of your life, and these authors do not get paid when I scan their work. They get paid when you buy it. These books are $12, $15, $19.
The Fisher is also in paperback. The Fisher, they're all in paperback. I agree with Harold that at this point, we're going to be studying for a long time to come, poo, poo, poo. I plan on doing this even if we return to the building. I love this so much. But really, there's nothing like I sit with all the books in front of me and I open them up and it's delicious. Right. If anybody also...
Shari is showing us that she has purchased every single book that we use, plus I think a few more that we haven't used.
I want to say one more thing about the Fisher that I meant to say, but I want to, and the Fisher and the Mitchell both use language that I cringe a little bit about by talking about men and women. And we now understand relating to gender very differently than when they were writing these books. And I look forward to the next generation of where they were trying to be expansive from not just referring to men by including women, but we understand that that's not all of humanity. And as our consciousness develops, our Psalm understanding will develop. So I want to make people aware that I'm conscious of that anachronism, honestly, of their translation. And we'll think about that as we go forward.
All right.
But yes, I encourage, if people also want to buy the books but can't afford it, speak to me directly, rabbi@cbst.org, and I will make sure you can get the books, okay? We don't want anybody to worry about money. We have somebody in the synagogue has donated money to make sure people can get books that they need, and this would fit. So my discretionary fund can help you. But there's something where Am HaSefer, we're people of the book. There's something about owning the books and we might add a book or two in the course of what we're doing, but these are going to be our basic texts.
So Bruce is going to put up the original text again. Cantor Nimi is going to sing us out, and then we are going to welcome our two guests who will answer all of our pressing questions about Hebrew classes, who are waiting in the back of the room.
Also about buying them, you can buy them from Jewish bookstores. J. Levine still has an online universe, so you don't have to buy from Amazon. J. Levine's, I don't have their address, easy to find, or a local Jewish bookstore or a local independent bookstore. You can order them from an independent bookstore.
I think it's bookstore.com or bookshop. I'll put some
bookshop.
things.
I think it's bookshop.
Bookshop.com. The books are fulfilled through independent booksellers. All right, Bruce, can you give us
bookshop.org.
Okay.
All right. So again, now we have a little bit even more of interpretations of that word adir. I loved how Fisher said it. Used the word covers. He said, it covers the earth. So another translation to add to the pocket on that. All right. So ikolo ma'im rabim adirim bishbereyam. Rabim Adirim Bishbereyam Adir Bamarom Adonai Adir Bamarom Adonai Adir Bamarom Adonai Adir Bamarom Adonai Nikolo Ma'im Rabim Adirim Bishbereyam Ikolo Ma'im Rabim Adirim Bishbereyam Adir Bamarom
Thank you, Jacob. And it's so nice to hear a musical instrument and a voice together. So wonderful. And thank you. And that's a wonderful selection from a psalm.